Welcome to Mindset Matters Book Club YouTube channel. Please subscribe and like to hear new book summaries.
Yes, definitely make sure to subscribe.
So, what if I told you that the last time you felt incredibly stressed or just, anxious or completely burned out, well, the world around you actually had absolutely nothing to do with it?
Which is a wild thing to hear, right?
Right. I mean, what if you were doing it to yourself, like on purpose, as this invisible biological reflex?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Today, we are looking at this deeply uncomfortable, but honestly entirely liberating truth, which is that your psychological suffering is completely optional.
Completely.
We are diving into a book called Don't Believe Everything You Think by Joseph Nguyen. And the premise we are tackling today is massive. It basically argues that everything you have been searching for, peace, joy, unconditional love, fulfillment, is already your natural default state of being. You just keep burying it.
It is a really profound claim. And frankly, when you first hear it, the natural human reaction is just absolute skepticism.
Well, 100%.
Right, because we are taught that peace is something you earn after you have, solved all your problems, paid off your mortgage, fixed your relationships.
Yeah, like it's at the finish line of a marathon.
Exactly. But what we are going to explore today completely flips that whole equation on its head. We're going to break down the actual mechanics of the human mind to show you not just what suffering is, but the precise mechanical root cause of it in your brain.
Which is so fascinating.
And more importantly, we're going to look at how to just simply turn it off.
I love that. And we're going to do this really systematically. We're going to start by defining what suffering actually is, separating objective reality from the narratives that we project onto it.
Right, stories we tell.
Yeah. And from there, we'll look at a foundational biological difference between having thoughts and the physical act of thinking.
That's a huge distinction.
It really is. We are going to bridge the gap between ancient spiritual concepts like divine downloads and the actual neuroscience of flow states. And then finally, we will explore some fascinating behavioral hacks to, audit your energy and break the loop of destructive habits.
It's going to be a big one. To start, we have to establish a really razor-sharp distinction between physical pain and psychological suffering.
Okay, lay it on.
So the book utilizes this brilliant framework originating in Buddhist philosophy known as the concept of the two arrows.
The two arrows. Got it.
Imagine you are walking down the street and out of nowhere, you get struck in the arm by an arrow.
Ouch. Yeah.
Right. That is the first arrow. It represents unavoidable physical or situational pain. You get sick, you lose your job, the market crashes, a loved one passes away.
The stuff that just happens in life.
Exactly. You cannot control that first arrow. It is the objective physical reality of being a human being in an unpredictable universe.
Wait, hold on. I want to represent the skeptical listener here for a second.
Please do.
If someone listening is dealing with a genuinely toxic boss or they are really struggling to pay their rent and keep the lights on, telling them their suffering is optional sounds a little bit tone deaf, doesn't it?
Sure, I hear that.
Like, are we really saying clinical anxiety or the stress of poverty is just a lack of spiritual discipline?
No, not at all. And that is exactly why the distinction of the two arrows is so critical here. The book is not invalidating the reality of the first arrow.
Okay, good.
If you can't pay rent, the physiological stress response, the literal lack of resources, that is real. That is the first arrow.
Right.
But the philosophy points out that immediately after that first arrow hits, a second arrow flies our way.
A second arrow.
Yeah, and being struck by that second arrow is entirely self-inflicted. Yeah. It represents our emotional turmoil, our narrative, the story we tell ourselves about the first arrow.
Oh, I see.
It's the voice in your head saying, why me? I am a total failure. My life is ruined forever. Everyone else has it figured out but me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The pain of the first arrow is mandatory, but the suffering caused by the second arrow, the story, that is optional.
Okay, that actually makes perfect sense. So the first arrow is the cold, hard fact. My bank account is at zero.
Exactly.
The second arrow is the judgment. I am worthless and I will never succeed. We are the ones shooting that second arrow into our own chests.
Precisely. We do it to ourselves.
But that brings up a massive question. If that second arrow is truly optional, why do we all keep shooting ourselves with it?
That's the million-dollar question.
It's like we are all walking around wearing personalized VR headsets that just project a psychological horror movie over the real world, and we've completely forgotten how to take the headset off.
That VR headset analogy perfectly captures how the brain constructs subjective reality. We do not actually live in objective reality at all.
We don't.
No, we live in a simulation of reality generated by our own perception. Think about two people sitting right next to each other in a coffee shop right now.
Okay, picturing it.
They are in the exact same physical space, smelling the exact same roasted coffee, hearing the same jazz music in the background, experiencing the exact same ambient temperature.
Right.
But one person is having a full-blown quarter-life existential crisis. They are spiraling, their heart rate is elevated, they feel like an absolute failure because they don't have their life together.
Meanwhile, the person sitting literally 2 feet away is just happily sipping their drink, peacefully people watching, totally content.
Exactly. It's the exact same physical reality, but they are having entirely different experiences of that reality.
That's wild.
And this proves that the environment is not causing the suffering. If the coffee shop caused anxiety, every single person in the coffee shop would be clinically anxious.
Right, the coffee shop would just be a known hazard zone.
Exactly. The meaning we attach to an event, the internal narrative we spin, that acts as a rigid filter for how we experience life.
So it's all the filter.
Yeah. The book gives another phenomenal example regarding money. If you survey 100 different people and ask them what money fundamentally means, you will get 100 aggressively different answers.
Oh, for sure. To one person, money is the ultimate symbol of freedom and security.
Right.
To another person, money represents like greed, evil, corruption, the root of societal collapse.
Exactly. But the physical paper itself, or the digital zeros in a banking app, have zero inherent meaning.
Right. A $100 bill doesn't know it's a $100 bill.
Right. We project the entire concept onto it. You could say the exact same thing about politics. You talk to 100 people about the exact same political figure, and you get 100 totally different, intensely emotional, visceral realities.
And we should probably be clear here. The book isn't taking a side on any of these political issues.
Not at all.
It is just pointing out the underlying mechanical reality. The event or the person is just data.
Just raw data.
The suffering, the anger, or the joy is entirely constructed by the perception we apply to the data.
Exactly. If we understand this, it means the root cause of our psychological suffering is never the external event. It is our own cognitive processing of the event.
Which is kind of a tough pill to swallow, to be honest.
It is. Now, the author is very careful to validate that our feelings are real. If you feel anxious, that anxiety is a very real physiological state. I mean, cortisol and adrenaline are literally pumping through your veins.
Yeah, your body's reacting.
But the trigger wasn't the world, it was your perception. And this is actually empowering, because if you only ever feel your own perception, you are always only one perception away from experiencing something completely different.
Okay, this brings up a perfect example. So yesterday I got an email from my producer.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. The email was just 2 words. Call me. No context, just call me.
The worst email to get.
Literally.
Yeah.
My brain immediately went to, I'm fired. The show is canceled. I need to update my resume. How will I pay my mortgage? My heart started pounding. I was sweating.
Yeah.
That is a perfect example of this, right? The call me is just pixels on a screen. That's the first arrow.
Right.
The I'm fired and going to be homeless narrative is the second arrow.
That is a textbook example. And honestly, it transitions us perfectly into the most crucial distinction in the entire book.
Okay, what is it?
It is the core epiphany that makes all of this actionable. The fundamental difference between having a thought and the physical act of thinking.
Having a thought versus thinking.
Yes. Most of us use those words totally interchangeably. We think they're the exact same thing, but neurologically and spiritually, they are completely different phenomena.
Really? Break that down for me.
Let's start with thoughts. Thoughts are nouns. They are raw data. They pop into your head completely uninvited, taking absolutely zero effort on your part.
So back to your producer's email. Call me. The thought call me pops into my head. I didn't ask for it. It just arrived.
Exactly. The book describes these spontaneous thoughts as raw energy, sometimes even like divine downloads from the universe or the subconscious mind.
Divine downloads. I like that.
Yeah, they are infinite, they are creative, and they require zero willpower. But thinking is a verb. Ah, verb.
Thinking is the active, laborious process of engaging with, analyzing, wrestling with, and building narratives around those spontaneous thoughts.
I see. So thinking is like revving a car engine in neutral. You have your foot just slammed on the gas pedal. You are burning a massive amount of fuel. The engine is screaming. It's creating a ton of heat and friction. But the car isn't actually in gear.
That is a brilliant way to picture it.
You literally aren't moving an inch. It just gives you the illusion that you are doing something productive because it feels so intense.
That is a phenomenal analogy because it really highlights the biological toll of the process. Thinking takes massive amounts of metabolic energy.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
Willpower and cognitive processing are strictly finite resources. When you are actively thinking, you are engaging the ego, specifically the prefrontal cortex, to try and predict and control the future.
Right.
The source of a spontaneous thought is the subconscious, or the universe. It is light and expansive. The source of active thinking is the ego. It is heavy, restrictive, and deeply rooted in fear. But if it's so exhausting and so painful, why is my brain wired to do it the second I get a cryptic email? Like, why is that my default?
Because of survival. We really have to look at the evolutionary biology here, specifically the amygdala and the brain's negativity bias.
Okay, the evolutionary angle.
For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors survived by actively anticipating worst-case scenarios. If you are walking through the jungle and you hear a rustle in the bushes, the human who thinks, oh, it's just the wind, no big deal, gets eaten by a tiger.
Right, and their genetics are removed from the gene pool.
Exactly. The human who immediately engages in catastrophic thinking like, it's a tiger, it's going to kill me, where's my spear, what is my escape route, that human survives.
So my brain treats an email from my producer exactly the same way it treats a tiger in the bushes.
Exactly the same way. The mind's primary job is keeping you alive, not making you happy.
Wow.
It hasn't updated its software for the modern corporate environment. It still scans the horizon for threats and calculates worst-case scenarios just to keep you safe.
So it's just trying to help.
Yeah, but while this mechanism keeps you alive, it actively prevents you from thriving. If you live in a constant state of fight or flight, anticipating danger that doesn't actually exist, you are generating constant psychological suffering.
I mean, that makes total sense.
Thinking is the root cause of all our suffering, not the spontaneous thoughts, but our active, terrified engagement with them.
Okay, so if thinking is this invisible biological trap, and my brain is evolutionarily hardwired to do it automatically to keep me safe, how am I supposed to catch myself doing it before my day is completely ruined?
That's the hard part.
Right. It's not like a check engine light comes on in my vision.
Well, actually, a check engine light does come on.
It does.
Yes. The book provides an incredibly simple, built-in biological warning system, which is our emotional state.
Oh, our emotions.
The core principle here is that we only ever feel what we are actively thinking. When we experience negative emotions, it is not a sign that our life is falling apart. It is simply a biological indicator that we are engaged in excessive active thinking.
The book uses this analogy of the thought-o-meter, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Imagine the dashboard of your car. You have an RPM gauge, right? Right. But imagine this gauge measures thoughts per minute.
I love that visual.
Yeah, when you are just going about your day, totally present, you're in the green zone, the engine is purring. But when you start overanalyzing that email, worrying about the mortgage, replaying an argument you had with your spouse 3 years ago, the thought-o-meter revs up.
Right. The RPMs climb higher and higher.
And eventually, the needle hits the red zone. When your mind hits the red zone, you experience it physically. Your chest tightens, you feel burned out, angry, stressed, and anxious.
It is literally your internal radar system. The intensity of your negative emotions is directly correlated to the sheer volume of active thinking you are engaging in at that exact moment.
Just the volume of it.
Yeah. Notice it is not what you are thinking about that causes the suffering. It is the sheer mechanical friction of how intensely you are overprocessing.
But wait, this flies in the face of everything we are taught about mental health and personal development.
How so?
Usually when I feel a gut-wrenching spike of anxiety, my immediate instinct is that I need to solve the anxiety.
Right.
Like if I feel anxious about a presentation, I sit down, I analyze where the anxiety is coming from, I map out every possible way the presentation could fail, and I try to build a contingency plan for all of it. I try to think my way out of the feeling.
And how well does that usually work for you?
It makes it 10 times worse. I just end up vibrating with panic at 2 a.m.
Exactly. Because you are trying to use the exact same tool that caused the problem to fix the problem.
Oh, man.
You are trying to use active thinking to cure the exhaustion of active thinking. You are just pressing the gas pedal harder while you are still in neutral.
That makes so much sense.
The book quotes Albert Einstein here, who famously said, "We can't solve problems by using the same level of consciousness we were at when we created them." When you dive into the anxiety to dissect it, you are just feeding it.
So what am I supposed to do? Just, ignore it?
You don't ignore it, but you recontextualize it. When you feel that anxiety, you recognize it is just your internal dashboard telling you, hey, your RPMs are too high, your engine is overheating, take your foot off the gas.
Take your foot off the gas.
The moment you realize your negative emotion is just a mechanical byproduct of an overactive brain, you stop taking the content of your thoughts so seriously. You stop feeding the fire.
The book uses this imagery of a glass of muddy water, which I found really helpful.
That's a great one.
Imagine you scoop a glass of water out of a muddy puddle. If you stick a spoon in there and actively stir the water, which represents our active thinking, our attempt to fix the problem, the dirt swirls around violently.
Right.
And the water becomes completely opaque and murky. You can't see through it. Now, how do you make the water clear?
That's the question.
You don't reach in with tweezers and try to individually pull out every single microscopic particle of dirt. That would take forever and just agitate the water more. What do?
You literally do nothing. You stop stirring.
Exactly. You put the glass down on the table and you walk away.
You just leave it alone. And because of gravity, the debris naturally settles to the bottom of the glass. The water's natural clarity spontaneously returns.
It's so simple.
It doesn't require any effort to be clear. Clarity is its default state when left undisturbed.
And this leads to one of the most profound paradigm shifts in the entire book.
What's that?
You do not have to think positive to feel positive.
Yes, that is huge.
Forcing positive affirmations when you are terrified is still active thinking. It still burns cognitive fuel. Peace, unconditional love, and joy are not states you have to generate, earn, or construct. They are your biological and spiritual factory settings.
Think about a time when you felt incredibly joyful, completely at peace, or totally in love. Maybe you were watching a sunset, or holding your newborn child, or laughing uncontrollably with a friend.
I can picture a few moments like that.
If you really break down that exact moment, how much active, analytical, problem-solving thinking were you doing?
None. Zero.
Right. You were completely devoid of thought. You were just purely experiencing the present moment.
Which brings us to the deeper mechanics of what is actually happening when we stop stirring the water.
Yeah.
What exactly are we tapping into when we let the engine idle?
This is where it gets really interesting.
To explain this, the book introduces the foundational work of Sydney Banks, a philosopher who proposed that the human experience is fundamentally created by three principles.
The three principles: universal mind, consciousness, and thought.
Right. We've covered thought as the raw data, the spontaneous top-ups, and consciousness is simply the awareness, the screen on which the movie of life is playing, which allows us to experience existence.
Yes.
But the third principle, the universal mind, is where this gets really deep. It sounds a bit esoteric at first, but the author grounds it incredibly well.
He really does. The universal mind is basically the intelligence behind all living systems. It is the invisible blueprint of the cosmos. It's the mechanism that allows a tiny, seemingly inert acorn to possess the complex biological knowledge required to grow into a massive oak tree.
Right, the acorn doesn't have to think about growing.
Exactly. It's the intelligence that keeps the planets in perfect orbital mechanics without any conscious intervention.
Or, to make it deeply personal, it's how your own physical body operates.
Yes, the body is a perfect example.
If you accidentally cut your finger chopping vegetables, you don't have to consciously sit down and manually instruct your white blood cells to rush to the wound, tell your platelets to coagulate, and direct your skin cells to synthesize new tissue.
Could you imagine if we had to do that?
We'd all be in trouble. It happens entirely automatically, driven by an intelligence vastly superior to your conscious analytical mind. That intelligence is the universal mind.
Now, here's where we bridge the spiritual with the scientific. When we stop our active, ego-driven thinking, when we quiet the prefrontal cortex, we automatically plug back into this universal mind.
Plug back in.
In neuroscience, this is referred to as transient hypofrontality. It is the literal shutting down of the brain's analytical self-monitoring centers.
Oh, wow.
This allows the subconscious mind, which can process millions of data points a second compared to the conscious mind's 40, to just take over. This is the biological reality of what athletes and artists call being in flow, or the zone.
It's a state of pure connection to a higher processing power. And conversely, when we feel stressed or anxious, it means we have literally severed our connection to that universal mind.
We've unplugged ourselves.
We've unplugged from the supercomputer because we are stubbornly trying to figure it out with our tiny, limited, finite ego. We trust our terrified internal monologue more than we trust our intuition.
That's so true.
I like to picture it like the weather. Think about the sun. Even when it is pitch black in the middle of the night or when there is a massive, violent thunderstorm raging, the sun hasn't ceased to exist.
Right.
It hasn't permanently vanished from the solar system. It is just temporarily hidden from your limited vantage point.
Oh.
Our natural state of joy and intuitive connection is exactly like that sun. It is always there, radiating at full capacity. It just gets temporarily hidden behind the dark storm clouds of our active, anxious overthinking.
That is a brilliant visualization because when you realize the sun is a permanent fixture, you stop panicking during a thunderstorm.
Yeah, you don't fight the storm.
You don't try to punch the clouds, you just wait for the weather system to pass, knowing the light is inevitably going to return. The peace is never lost. It is only temporarily forgotten.
But this is exactly where high achievers, executives, and type A personalities usually throw their hands up and hit pause.
Oh, absolutely.
Because this sounds incredibly peaceful and beautiful for a monk sitting on a mountain. But the listener's probably thinking, if I just stop thinking, how on earth do I actually get anything done in the real world?
Right. How do I pay my taxes, lead my team, or grow my business?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Am I just going to become this passive, lazy couch potato who never achieves anything because I'm just sitting around waiting for the clouds to clear?
It is the most common and honestly most valid fear when people first encounter this philosophy. The ego, the survival brain, desperately tells you that without its constant worrying, planning, and grinding, your life will completely fall apart.
But the book addresses this head on.
It does, with historical evidence. It turns out the exact opposite is true. Peak performance, ultimate productivity, and world-changing innovations occur exactly when we stop actively thinking.
The book shares some unbelievable historical anecdotes about the most productive minds in human history to prove this. Let's look at Thomas Edison, one of the most prolific inventors of all time.
This is a great story.
When Edison was stuck on a complex engineering problem, he didn't sit at his desk drinking coffee, grinding his teeth, and forcing his brain to overanalyze the math.
He had a totally different approach.
He actually had a specific physical protocol to bypass his active thinking. He would sit in a comfortable armchair and hold heavy metal balls in his hands, and he would place metal baking pans on the floor directly below his hands. Then he would intentionally let himself drift off to sleep.
He was actively seeking what neuroscientists call the hypnagogic state.
The hypnagogic state.
Yeah, that liminal space right between wakefulness and sleep where theta brainwaves dominate and the analytical ego is entirely dormant.
All right. So as he lost consciousness and entered that space of complete mental nothingness, his muscle cone would relax. His grip would loosen. The metal balls would drop, crash into the metal pans on the floor, and jolt him awake.
And in that exact precise moment of waking, before his ego had time to boot up and start overthinking again, a sudden solution, a pure divine download would pop into his mind effortlessly.
That is just incredible.
He literally bypassed his conscious thinking to solve problems his conscious mind couldn't handle.
Albert Einstein utilized a very similar mechanism, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
When Einstein was stuck on a massively difficult physics equation, he wouldn't try to brute force a solution. He implicitly understood that his active thinking was creating a cognitive block.
Right.
So he would completely walk away from the chalkboard and pick up his violin. He engaged in an activity that required immense physical presence and flow, but absolutely no analytical problem solving. By distracting the prefrontal cortex and creating mental space, the answer to the equation would just arrive, seemingly out of the ether.
It is wild to consider that the theory of relativity, literally one of greatest intellectual achievements in human history, might have been born in a moment when Einstein was explicitly not thinking about physics.
It really proves definitively that we do not have to try and figure everything out with brute force.
In fact, we physically cannot access ideas beyond our current capabilities using our current finite mind. If the solution was in your current conscious thinking, you would have already found it.
That's a really good point.
You can only access new insights by making space for the subconscious or the universal mind to deliver them. The book quotes the author James Clear, who sums this up perfectly. Anxiety is thought without control. Flow is control without thought.
Flow is control without thought.
That is so powerful. Think about professional athletes. When a batter in baseball is facing a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, they do not have the time to consciously think about the mechanics of their swing, the angle of their elbow, or the rotation of their hips.
No, the ball reaches the plate in like 400 milliseconds.
Right. If they actively think, they strike out. They have to rely entirely on muscle memory, presence, and flow. The moment they start thinking, they hesitate and they choke. The exact same principle applies to our daily work, our writing, our coding, our leadership.
So what does this mean practically for the listener? How do you actually tap into this in a boardroom or during a creative project?
Yeah, how do we use this? The book emphasizes that it really comes down to trusting your inner GPS, your intuition. You already know what you need to do in almost any given situation, but your active thinking immediately jumps in and talks you out of it by generating hypothetical fear and self-doubt.
It's so true.
And the author gives a very stark warning here that we have to acknowledge. Society will almost never confirm your intuition until your idea is already mainstream and successful.
That is such an important point. If you have an intuitive download to change careers or start a weird new business or end a relationship, and you go looking outside yourself for external validation, asking your parents, your friends, your coworkers for their opinion, you are just inviting their fear-based thinking into your life.
Exactly. The crowd is always operating from a state of survival and consensus.
Right. Your intuition is operating from the universal mind. Following your gut is going to feel entirely unsupported by the external world initially, which is exactly why it requires courage.
Trusting that intuition naturally leads us to the concept of setting goals, because even if we drop our anxious thinking, we still have desires.
Yeah, we still want things.
You want to build things, experience the world, and grow. But how do we set ambitious goals if we aren't heavily analyzing our future and meticulously planning out a 10-year roadmap?
The book clarifies this beautifully. Goals and ambitions are not inherently bad or toxic. It all comes down to the source of the goal.
The source, right.
Are your goals being created out of inspiration, which arises from divine thought, flow, and intuition? Or are they being created out of desperation, which is driven entirely by the ego, fear of inadequacy, and active anxious thinking?
To contextualize this, the author pulls out a classic quote from William Shakespeare's Hamlet. "There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so."
Oh, I love that quote.
And he pairs it with one of the most striking analogies in the book, the piano key analogy. Imagine a standard piano with 88 keys. When you look at the keyboard, no single key is inherently wrong. A C-sharp isn't evil. An F-flat isn't morally corrupt.
Right, they're just notes.
It is simply a frequency. It is only wrong if you expect it to fit perfectly into a specific song it wasn't meant for.
This is a profoundly liberating way to view the world, especially right now in our hyper-polarized society. We expend massive amounts of cognitive energy labeling things as objectively right or objectively wrong.
Oh, constantly.
The book applies this to how we view opposing political parties, or different religious beliefs, or alternative career paths, or even just family members who disagree with us. If we stop trying to force every single key on the piano to play our specific ego-driven song, we immediately stop suffering. We realize they're not evil. They are just different notes vibrating at a different frequency.
And we can apply this internally, too. It is incredibly liberating to stop judging the events of our own lives as wrong. We obsessively think, oh, I took the wrong job out of college, or I made the wrong choice moving to this city, or I wasted 5 years in the wrong relationship.
I think we all do that.
But it's like hiking a massive mountain. There are no wrong spots to stop and take in the view. You are simply looking at the exact same scenery from different vantage points. The suffering only materializes when you stand at one beautiful overlook and torture yourself with the relentless thought that you should be at a different one.
Yes. You ruin the current view by obsessing over a hypothetical one. Instead of frantically searching for what is right or wrong, the book urges us to look for universal truth. And true universal truth is not subjective.
Right.
If a concept is only true for you, based on your background, and not true for someone on the other side of the planet, it is not a universal truth. It is just a belief. It is just a thought you have become deeply attached to.
And the ultimate truth is this. The answer to why you are miserable is never out there in the circumstantial world. If you look outside yourself to find the source of your pain, blaming the economy, your boss, your spouse, the government, you will be searching for eternity.
For eternity.
Because the external world is constantly shifting. The answer is always inside. You are suffering exclusively because you are believing the terrifying stories your own thinking is generating.
So how do we cut through the noise? How do we find out what we actually want to do, what our true goals are, if we strip away all the societal expectations, the parental pressure, and the ego's fear of failure?
There is a really practical way to do this.
Yeah, the book offers what I genuinely believe is the ultimate journaling prompt. It asks you to sit down and answer this specific question. If I had infinite money, had already traveled the entire world, had absolutely zero fear, and knew I would never receive any public recognition or credit for what I do. What would I do, or what would I create?
That prompt is utterly brilliant because it acts like a surgical tool. It surgically removes all of the ego's usual desperate motivations.
It really does.
It removes financial desperation. It removes the desire for social status. It removes the need for external validation. And it removes the paralyzing fear of failure. When you strip away all of those thinking triggers, your ego goes quiet.
And then what's left?
Whatever answers naturally bubble up to the surface in that space of quiet are coming straight from your intuition. That is how you discover goals born of pure inspiration, not survival desperation.
Okay, having established this massive philosophical and neurological shift, that thinking is a survival mechanism that ruins our peace, and that flow is our natural state of being, it's time to get intensely practical.
Yes, let's get into the frameworks.
We need to equip you, the listener, with the exact tactical frameworks the book provides to actually apply this to your chaotic daily life and your career. Because understanding this intellectually on a podcast is one thing, but living it when your inbox is exploding on a Tuesday morning is another.
The author is highly pragmatic here. He provides actionable steps to identify and remove what he calls thinking triggers, so you can intentionally design a life that shifts you into that state of flow. The most impactful practical framework in the book is the energy audit for work.
Oh, I love this part.
This is an absolute game changer for anyone feeling chronically burned out. Here's how it works. You sit down with a piece of paper and make 2 lists regarding your professional life.
Okay, 2 lists.
List 1, tasks you do at work that actively drain your energy, things that feel heavy, laborious, and require immense willpower. List 2, tasks that give you energy, things that make you feel alive, inspired, where time seems to vanish.
And then you rate every single task on a scale from 1 to 10. A 1 is a soul-crushing, energy-draining, miserable task.
Oh.
A 10 is absolute pure flow state where you are operating at peak genius.
Right.
And the directive the author gives is simple, but highly aggressive. Each week, you must eliminate, delegate, or automate 1 to 3 of those draining tasks, the 1s and 2s. You ruthlessly purge them.
Ruthless.
You keep doing this week after week until you spend 80% of your working hours operating on the 9s and 10s. By removing the tasks that force you into heavy, resistant, ego-driven thinking, you naturally default into spending more time in flow.
But this is where people push back. What if your job is fundamentally comprised of 1s and 2s? What if you are an accountant and staring at dense Excel spreadsheets actively drains your energy, but that is literally your entire job description? You can't just delegate your entire job.
This is where the framework gets really nuanced. If you can't change the task, you have to audit how you're approaching the task. The spreadsheet itself isn't the one. A spreadsheet is just a grid on a screen. It has no inherent energy.
Exactly.
The drain comes from the perception and the thinking you bring to the spreadsheet. If you approach the spreadsheet thinking, I hate this is boring, I wish I was doing something creative, I'm wasting my life, you are generating massive friction. That thinking is what drains you.
Yes.
The audit forces you to either remove the task or remove the toxic thinking associated with the task. You have to find a way to drop into a state of presence with the numbers.
Exactly. The exhaustion isn't from the work, it's from the resistance to the work.
Resistance is exhausting.
The second major framework in the book addresses breaking destructive behavioral habits. Because when we are trapped in chronic, painful thinking, we instinctively turn to destructive habits to numb the anxiety. We turn to doom scrolling on social media, binge eating, alcohol, or compulsive shopping.
We've all been there.
The book provides a meticulous analytical process to dismantle these habits. First, you have to become acutely, almost uncomfortably aware of the trigger feeling. What exact physiological sensation are you feeling right before you reach for your phone or pour that drink?
You have to become a scientist, studying your own behavior. You write down the exact details. My chest was tight. I was thinking about my upcoming review. I felt inadequate. You don't spare any details.
No, you have to be honest.
But the real magic happens in a cognitive intervention you perform next. The crucial question the book demands you ask yourself in that exact moment is this. What do you believe will happen if you don't perform the behavior, and is it absolutely 100% true?
That single question violently unravels the illusion the ego has constructed. Your mind might be screaming at you, if I don't check my work email right now at 10 p.m., my boss will be furious, everything will fall apart, I will get fired, and I will be living on the street.
The ego presents this as absolute fact.
But you stop and ask, Is that absolutely 100% true? Can I prove it in a court of law? Of course not. It is entirely a story. It is a terrifying VR movie your mind is projecting to keep you vigilant. When you expose the lie, the compulsion instantly loses its grip on your nervous system.
And to prevent yourself from falling back into those old, deep-seated thinking traps, the book highly recommends implementing an activation ritual.
An activation ritual.
Now, to be clear, this is not your standard hustle culture, wake up at 4 a.m. and grind morning routine. It is a specific, gentle routine designed to build momentum in a positive, non-thinking direction immediately upon waking up.
That transition from sleep to waking is incredibly vulnerable.
It really is. Before the ego has a chance to fully boot up, download yesterday's anxieties, and start stressing about the day ahead, you actively initiate a state of flow.
This could be through 10 minutes of silent meditation, stream of consciousness journaling without filtering, or just taking a walk outside and observing the trees without headphones on. Because physics applies to psychology, an object in motion stays in motion.
Right.
If you consciously start the day anchored in non-thinking and presence, it is exponentially easier to maintain that state when the inevitable stresses of the workday arise.
But here is the ultimate paradox, and perhaps the most profoundly important piece of practical advice in the entire book. You cannot fight the thinking.
You really can't.
If you catch yourself slipping into the familiar, agonizing pain of overthinking, and you absolutely will because you have a human brain evolved over millions of years, do not feel guilty. Do not berate yourself.
No, don't do that.
Do not think, oh, I'm failing at being mindful, I'm doing this wrong. Guilt and self-punishment are just more complex forms of active thinking.
It is the ultimate trap. You absolutely cannot think your way out of thinking. When you feel that negative emotion, the anxiety or the frustration, you simply welcome it.
Welcome it.
You recognize that you are the vast, silent, sacred space holding those turbulent feelings. You are not the feelings themselves. You meet the anxiety with radical acceptance. You observe it and say, my nervous system is revving high. I am caught up in my thinking again.
Just acknowledge it.
And the moment you shine the light of neutral awareness on it without violently fighting it or judging it, the debris begins to settle. The feelings naturally dissipate on their own because you have stopped feeding them friction.
It is exactly like realizing you are deeply engrossed in a terrifying horror movie. You don't jump out of your seat and run into the screen to fight the monster. You just blink, look around the dark theater, and remember you are sitting in a chair eating popcorn. You detach from the narrative.
That's a great way to put it.
And the most incredible part is that the book promises that doing this, simply cultivating this internal space of non-thinking, creates massive, tangible, physical byproducts in the real world. The author cites clients experiencing massive spikes in creative output, 2 to 5 times increases in their financial income, spontaneously overcoming lifelong addictions, and experiencing radical improvements in their physical health and vitality.
But the crucial caveat is that you aren't obsessively chasing the money, the promotion, or the health. You aren't operating out of desperation to fix yourself. You are solely focused on cultivating the internal peace, and the rest miraculously falls into your lap because you are finally operating out of pure inspiration.
Yeah, your universal mind is unimpeded.
It is the ultimate inside-out approach to human existence. We spend our entire lives frantically trying to rearrange the external world, trying to control people and events so we can finally feel a brief moment of peace inside. This book flips the equation completely. Find the peace inside by dropping the heavy burden of thinking, and the external world will naturally arrange itself in ways far more magnificent than your limited ego could have ever imagined or planned.
This has been an absolutely mind-bending, paradigm-shifting journey. To briefly recap the massive ground we've covered today, the physical pain of life, that first arrow, is an unavoidable part of the human contract.
True.
But the psychological suffering, the second arrow, is entirely optional. That suffering is caused by one thing and one thing only, our own active, terrified thinking.
Our active thinking.
Spontaneous thoughts are divine data points. Active thinking is the heavy, exhausting survival mechanism that ruins our peace. Our negative emotions are not massive life problems demanding to be solved, but simply a dashboard warning us that our cognitive engine is revving too high.
And by taking a step back, by simply noticing the mental friction and consciously choosing not to engage, we plug back into the universal mind. We access the flow state, peak performance, and elegant solutions that our finite, stressed-out minds could never construct. We transition our lives from a state of exhausting desperation to a state of effortless inspiration.
I want to remind you, the listener, of a really beautiful promise the author makes near the end of the book. Once your consciousness expands to understand this, it physically cannot contract back to its original size.
It's a one-way street.
You have heard these concepts today. You now intimately understand the fundamental difference between having thoughts and the act of thinking. You cannot unknow this. As a fascinating behavioral experiment, I highly encourage you to try that infinite money thought experiment today. Sit down for just 5 quiet minutes and ask yourself what you would build or create if fear, societal judgment, and money were completely removed from the equation. Uncover what your intuition is actually trying to tell you.
And remember, when you inevitably fall back into stress and overthinking tomorrow morning, you have not failed the experiment. You are always just one thought, one simple realization away from dropping the heavy baggage, stepping out of the illusion, and returning to your natural default state of peace and unconditional clarity.
As we wrap up this incredibly deep dive, I want to circle back to that foundational idea of the mind as an ancient biological survival tool, a mechanism constantly scanning the bushes for imaginary tigers, projecting a VR horror movie just to keep you hyper-alert. I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. If active thinking is just a primitive survival mechanism designed exclusively to keep you safe from hypothetical future threats, well, what if the absolute greatest danger to your life isn't actually out there in the external world, but is actually your own mind's relentless, exhausting attempt to protect you from fully living it?